Amtgard Leadership University, sitting here at Dungeon Crawl 2016 up in the mighty Principality of Northreach. With us today, we have Sain and Gorin, two Knights of Dragonspine. Gorin, a local Alaskan, and Sain coming to us all the way from Las Cruces. As I said earlier, and as we normally do with the Amtgard Leadership University panels, what I'm going to ask you to do is just do a quick 60-second introduction. Do me a favor, tell us a little bit about yourself, explain where you got your knighthood and what's your knighthood, what order it's in, and then any highlights you want to make sure that we cover today, and then we'll take note and we'll make sure we address those as the day goes on. Okay, so without further ado, Sir Sain.
Hi, my name is Sir Sain Ironhand-Stroke. I'm from Las Cruces, New Mexico, which is Dragonspine proper. It's the kingdom seat of the kingdom. I am a Warlord Sword Knight. I got my Warlord in 2014, and my sword, I was Knighted Sword in 2015. Fighting in the Southwest is kind of New Mexico, Texas is kind of the heart of fighting in Amtgard. Not to offend anybody from anywhere else, but come at me.
Warlord statement, sure.
So, if you got any questions about, the Sword Knight deal, let me know.
Okay. Sir Gorin.
Sir Gorin, no long last name. I'm a Knight of the Crown. I was Dragonspine knighted to me back in 2007. I've been playing Amtgard since May 24th of 2000, and been up here in Alaska the whole time. Most of you guys know me pretty well here. I spent most of my efforts in Amtgard helping to try and build the Principality up here. So you guys have all seen me in all the different parts for the most part, and my Amtgard passions tend to be in the leadership and administrative arenas, although I dabble in pretty much everything.
All right, well, thank you. So since obviously we have a fairly small panel, what I will probably do is bounce each of the questions off for both of you. And when in doubt, don't be afraid to speak up. So Sir Sain, let's talk about really the basics of knighthood. Was knighthood a goal for you?
Knighthood was never a goal that I had set for myself to achieve. Once I'd been in Amtgard for some modicum of time and get familiar with the politics system of Amtgard, I knew kind of naturally that if I just kept doing Amtgard stuff and doing it as best I can, that I was going to get knighted eventually. I was never really I never was really prepared for for it when it happened. I kind of knew it was going to happen relatively soon when I got my Warlord, because those two things tend to come hand in hand. But no, it was never a goal for me. And when I started fighting, all I wanted to do was be better than I was a week ago. And every Saturday, my goal was just to be better than I was last Saturday, or be better than Isaac today, or be better than Kyle today. And
by Isaac and Kyle,
I'm sorry, Anatole and Ilmrin and Shion. Just try to be as good as those guys or better every Saturday. And those were my goals, and knighthood really wasn't one of them.
Sir Gorin, was knighthood a goal for you?
Actually, I very different experience, because, I grew up in Amtgard up in Astra Winds, which is pretty much as far as you can get from any cultural center of Amtgard. It really is like the borderlands. So I didn't have the window into the politics or really any knights other than Sir Goldcrest to compare myself to. So I started Amtgard in June of 2000, and in October of 2000, Sir Goldcrest asked me if I wanted to be a page or man-at-arms. And I was just trucking along happy as can be as a man-at-arms for 2 years. Then he tossed a squire's belt at me. And another year went by before somebody said, somebody mentioned that possibly Goldcrest wanted me to be a knight one day. And up until that moment, I swear to God, it had never actually occurred to me. It was not something I ever pursued. I was always focused on completely different things in Amtgard. And so when Randall, he was king at the time, called me to let me know that they had taken a vote and he had decided he was going to knight me and set the schedule and everything for that, I was pretty much completely off guard. It wasn't on my radar at all. So no, it was never really a goal of mine at all.
Okay. Sir Sain, you mentioned that Warlord and knighthood sort of went together. Is that common? I mean, I know there's a lot of discussion, but masterhood is knighthood the next coronation or feast away?
from maybe not the next coronation or feast away, but they're definitely, in my experience or, the history of the area that I'm around, definitely they're tied together. A lot of times, in a lot of kingdoms, you get a masterhood and then it's essentially permission for the circle to knight you. They're definitely tied together. And I don't know a lot of warlords who aren't sword knights or are not going to be.
Okay. So, having talked about the masterhood and then the knighthood and they're close together, I want to flip it around just a little bit to the goal piece because we're still talking about goals and that's where we started. So, there's often a lot of discussion, Sir Gorin, about whether or not you can be open about knighthood being a goal. Now, both of you said that it really wasn't a goal for you, but as members of the knighthood and members of a circle of knights, can somebody aspiring to knighthood be open about it? And are there risks associated with it? What are they?
There are. It's an interesting cultural phenomenon in which we take one of the highest accolades in the game and expect people not to aspire to it.
Not to talk about it.
Right.
Like, where we're from, like, you can't really, like, even ask people, like, how do you become a knight? Or, like, is it possible for me to, like, try to attain this thing? It was like, let's not talk about it at all, and you can't try to get to it, and then, like, it'll just happen one day.
But it's a really big deal if it happens.
It is.
It is. And so what my experience has been sort of unique in that I've, throughout my Amtgard career, been able to watch the whole political knighting process from very much the outside. I'm not a part of any, like, political circles. People don't, come to me to try and get me to vote a certain way. I'm pretty much on the fringe. And so what I've noticed is when you get into the older Amtgard kingdoms, where there's a lot of jaded people, maybe a history of some bad knightings, people tend, if you bring up the fact that you want to be a knight, people immediately question your motives. And then at that point, everything you do, like, is he running this feast just because he wants to be a knight? And personally, I'm just happy you ran a feast. Like, I think that's great, and it helps the organization. But some people, for some reason, take offense to the fact that you're doing something just to get the award. In my experience, the people that are actually doing that don't ever get knighted because they just don't really have the right frame of mind. But that's been my experience.
So, Sain, did you want to?
Yeah, I guess to answer your, like, actual question, I'm fine with it. I'm fine with that being a stated goal. Like, I have no problem with that as long as those people are held to the same standard that we hold everybody else to, and their achievements and accomplishments are kind of analyzed in the same way we analyze anybody else's. But, like, as far as it being, like, coming out and saying, I'm going to tell the truth and I'm trying to get there. Like, I'm totally cool with that.
And I find that most knights are. It's the people that aren't knights that I get the strongest negative reactions from in that particular area. But I think that where you really start to see real danger in that frame of mind is when you start to vocalize any sort of sense of entitlement for the award. Like, I should be a knight, or I'm owed this, or I deserve it.
Or disagreement with the process if you're not a knight. Like, right. You can't do that. No. Like, if you are not a knight, you cannot disagree with, like, you can't, like, the way your kingdom makes knights, you're not allowed to really, like, maybe they should do it differently. No.
You can't buck the system until you're part of the system.
Apparently, that's exactly right. Apparently, that's the way it is.
Good job. You got me off my point. So, talked a little bit about the masterhood, and then we talked a little bit about the expectations and sort of the attitude, the entitlement thing. So the rule book talks about how knighthood is masterhood quality plus character.
Right.
Sir Sain, what's the character spiel? What's the attitude expected of a knight?
There's platitudes that, go around. I don't know how many knightings you guys have all seen, but there's always, like, this speech about, the work begins now, and, like, now you have to earn it and all this stuff. And, the character aspect of, because it's some sort of intangible, right? It's like, it's something, well, we'll know it when we see it kind of thing. It's not something that's quantifiable or measured. That's your masterhood, right? You get to this thing is your qualifications, and then if you've got some sort of intangible, nebulous stuff that makes Amtgard better than will knight you. I'm not sure what it is. Like, to be honest with you, I mean,
I'm not sure.
sure. I think there's people that you just like, you see them and it's no question, right? You're like, yeah, obviously that person would make a great knight. And then there's people you said, there's no way this person would ever be a good like ambassador for Amtgard. And then there's a whole bunch of people in the middle who are like, well, who knows? And I'm not really sure what this character thing means.
So, Sir Gorin, I want to change it up a little bit.
All right.
So, Sir Sain already talked about how you can do masterhood, and then you sort of hit the qualifications, and then they look at character.
Right.
So, how is Amtgard going to recognize people that have the character but not devoted to the masterhood? I mean, is character the issue? And if so,
They become master griffins? I don't know. I mean, traditionally, we require our knights to demonstrate a certain level of achievement in one of the various aspects of Amtgard. And that's like, if you don't hit that bar, they don't even look at you for knighthood. I'm not really sure that there is a way to recognize, at least through the orders of knighthood, people that have the right character but don't have that level of achievement. And I know that there are definitely people, even in our own kingdom, that fit that description really well, where they have great character. They're awesome people. They would be excellent ambassadors for Amtgard, but their level of achievement is not quite there yet.
and this question is going to come to both of you, but Sir Sain, I'm going to start with you. You and I discussed earlier about expectations of knights and how they vary. Is that a good thing that we have some people that believe knights should, for lack of a better term, walk on water and be perfect examples of Amtgard, and there's others who see it as the brass ring and it's simply a award or recognition program? Do we need to steer one way or the other, or is there already too much of that?
I think there's a lot of the idea that Amtgard's like, or being knighted is like winning Amtgard. It's like the final achievement, right? And that's not necessarily good either, because there's a huge tradition in Dragonspine of people getting knighted and then quitting Amtgard forever. Not much anymore, but it used to be a thing. Like, you know, you knight them and make them a bunch of stuff and then never see them again. And I think if you think of knighthood as that achievement unlocked ability thing, then yeah, once you get it, there's no reason, unless you're having fun, there's no reason to stay. And in terms of expecting knights to walk on water, I think by the very nature of knighting somebody in this kind of system of culture that we've built, we expect them to be better than everybody else, or act more responsible, or, you know, be better at whatever order, the thing that they got knighted for. So I don't think that there's any way to get away from the expectation. Maybe it shouldn't be as strong as certain, you know, when I got knighted, I kind of just, and maybe it's, you know, my own point of view, but I felt like I can't lose another fight ever again kind of thing. And it just kind of, it weighs on you after a while until you just like say, I don't care anymore. And you have to make that decision on your own.
Sir Gorin?
You know, it's a tough thing because it's been a topic of conversation that comes up in Amtgard regularly, and it gets pretty heated when it does, because everyone has a different idea of what that expectation should be. I think it's a good thing that we try to hold our knights to a higher standard. The problem is that nobody can agree on what that standard is. You know, what I generally want of my knights is that they don't just follow all the rules of Amtgard that everybody's expected to follow, they champion them. And they don't need a whole nother set of rules. They just need to make sure that they're showing everybody an example of what following the rules looks like. And that's the most reasonable expectation of them, because right now it's pretty nebulous. Some places, knights are not held to really any standard, and they can pretty much get away with anything. And in some places, you know, somebody makes an honest mistake and their kingdom's calling for their belt. So, you know, and you'll see it from one end of the spectrum to the other.
Okay, so let's keep talking about becoming a knight. Do you need to become a squire or a page first? And if so, how do you become a squire or page man-at-arms? Sir Sain?
You absolutely don't. The person I was squired to was not ever belted to anybody else. And I probably didn't need to be either. Because, you know, when I started playing again, I was like 23. So I was an adult and didn't, a lot of people view the knight or the squire page man-at-arms thing as kind of, for people who are under 18 or whatever, it's kind of traditionally what it's kind of viewed as. But Glenolf was my friend, and I went to him at a PV coronation one time and just told him I was going to be a squire. And it was kind of, it was a symbiotic relationship. He gained a little status from me being a squire, and I gained a little status from him being my knight. So, but yeah, you definitely don't need to.
Okay.
Well, in Dragonspine, you don't need to.
So, Sir Gorin, other than following Sir Sain's example about just saying, I'm your squire, how would you approach somebody, or how do you become a squire, page, man-at-arms?
That's a tough one. It depends on your goals, really. I'm going to kind of back up a little bit, if that's okay.
Sure.
And say that Sain's right in that you don't need to be a squire or a page. But if you don't live in the same city as the person that's going to consider knighting you, having an advocate makes a difference. Whether they're actually your squire or page to them, if you live in a shire where there's no knights or experienced Amtgarders or whatever, that means it's pretty much up to you to be noticed. And so that definitely makes the threshold a little bit higher, and it's definitely more difficult. As someone who was the only knight in an entire state for a very long time, I can tell you that's challenging, because there's lots of great people, and I kind of want to squire all of them just so that I can officially advocate for them. But you can't do that, and so you have to unofficially advocate and help nudge them along. So when you're out way far away from your kingdom, you don't need to be a squire or a page, but it makes a difference. I mean, realistically, it just does.
I want to jump back because you guys don't have a ton of historic Amtgard cultural experience. Traditionally, if you're belted to a knight, it's their job to advocate for you. And so if you're fine with not having an advocate, yeah, you don't need one. But that is one of the jobs that's one of the things you get from being paged or squired or man-at-arms to somebody, is that they're an advocate for you.
So, I'm sorry, I was going to answer your original question.
Go ahead.
Okay. So you asked, how do you become a squire or page or man-at-arms or whatever? There's a couple things you want to look at. Is one, you got to ask yourself, why do I want to be a squire or a page or whatever? And if the goal is just to be a knight, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but you need to have that honest conversation with a knight. But I think that the most successful path is if you can find a knight who has the same passions that you have, because then not only will they be able to help guide you, but the achievements that you have are going to be much more noticeable, because you'll have a strong advocate. And you'll probably find the relationship a heck of a lot more satisfying, because you'll be hanging out with someone that digs the same stuff that you dig and has a lot of experience and wants to show you and help you get even further into it than you already were, which was my experience. And if I was knighted to a sword knight, for instance, I don't know that I would have enjoyed it as much. I like fighting, but I like leadership a lot more. And so being squired to someone who was also really passionate about leadership made a pretty tremendous difference on that experience, I think.
So the one point I just wanted to interject, and I'm sorry if I missed it somewhere, was I believe it's a fair statement to say, really, while it's nice to know you have sort of a formal relationship with a knight and that's going to be advocating for you, at least in the Kingdom of Dragonspine, it's fair to say that really all of us are put on notice as knights, that it's our job to be looking for and advocating for whomever they are, whether they're belted to us or not, and sometimes even advocating for somebody else's belted, right? I mean,
absolutely.
It's sort of that weird relationship, but it's nice sometimes also to know it's a formal thing.
That's why I put the caveat in Dragonspine. You don't need to have a belt, because I don't know how other kingdoms work.
So before we go into some of these deeper questions, and we've got some great ones here, talked to a couple of times about a knight circle.
Okay.
In Dragonspine, because they all seem to be different, but in Dragonspine, what's a knight circle meeting like? Sir Gorin?
Which kind of meeting? The in-person ones or the online ones?
It's your question to answer.
All right, fair enough. So in Dragonspine, we have a pretty effective knight circle. A knight circle is just simply all the knights in the kingdom. What I like about our knight circle is that we conduct all of our official business, like talking about up-and-coming knights or recommending whether or not we think the king should knight somebody, is all done online. Traditionally, if we go to big interkingdom events like Gathering of the Clans or something like that, we'll have a knights meeting. And that we just get together and we make the newest knight bring us beer. And we sit down and we just talk about what's been going on in our lives, whether it be Amtgard or non-Amtgard, in the last year since the last time we sat down and talked together. And it's great because we get to learn a lot about what's going on all over the kingdom. We get to learn a lot about what's going on with our knights, and we get to share a lot of experiences that we take back with us, and that might give us ideas for things that we want to do at home or ways that we can help other parks or other knights out. And it's a pretty neat way of doing things.
Sir Sain, did you want to add to that?
No, I killed it.
Okay. So again, we're going to keep things before we go back into the deep questions. We talked about character. We talked about masterhood, obviously being the big lines as far as when somebody steps into the qualifications of masterhood, and then character and the getting voted and actually the sword dropping. But so what are the major differences in the different orders? So you're saying, what's the difference between a warlord and a master rose?
I'm
Don't.
a warlord and a sword knight, so I'm going to speak from that perspective.
Again,
So-
trying to get lighthearted for a moment. Thank you.
So just for those who are maybe confused by the terminology, a warlord is essentially a master warrior. So there's an equivalent master of any of the roses or dragons or, whatever. The warlord is the only one that isn't. It's not really an award. It's measurable. It's quantifiable. It's taken. Nobody has to. It's not subjective. You win tournaments, you get a warlord. You win some set number of tournaments that are judged to be of quality competition, and it's the closest thing to an automatic award, as long as everybody judges the competition to be acceptable. The rest of, I guess Serpent Knight would be the next closest to being super quantifiable, because you can see the stuff and everybody judges it and it's there. Crown and Flame, it's a lot more subjective. It's like, does this thing this person do meet the qualifications, like he ran an event or whatever? And some people think it was great and some people don't think. I think the biggest difference between sword and everything and all the other orders is that the results are much more measurable. Your level of quality is measurable in a very succinct manner. And I don't see that as, it doesn't seem to apply as well to the other orders.
So Sir Gorin, is that fair? It sounds like warlord, it's an easy roadmap. Although it's difficult to obtain, there is a roadmap to order the warrior.
Yeah, win 4 tournaments.
Warlord, right?
Right.
So
It's
that easy.
No, but it's not supposed to be. You have 4 different orders of knighthood that measure 4 very different things. Trying to say that they should all be measured exactly the same is unrealistic, at least in any system that we've ever tried to come up with. And it is challenging, because if Sain just stomps tournaments for years, you can't argue with the fact that he won. He either won or he didn't. Whereas, like, say, a crown knight like myself, the king looks at what you did and said, did he serve with excellence in these positions? Did he have an impact on his park? I mean, these are things that are fairly nebulous and that 2 people could probably argue about. Whereas winning a tournament, you either did it or you didn't. So it's a little bit more challenging. At the same time, being a warlord is hard, because I don't have other crown knights trying to stop me from running for office. You know what I mean? Like, if I want to run to be king, I don't have 4 crown knights showing up to say, well, we're going to run against you then. Whereas Knight of the Sword, that's exactly what happens. Someone starts to see that you've got 9 orders of the warrior and you show up at a tournament, suddenly there's all these other warlords and stuff driving across the country to be there with you and make sure that you don't. So when you earn it, I mean, it's kind of hard to argue. So it's a little bit different. And no, it's not fair, but it's apples and oranges a lot of time.
I don't think there's a way to make it fair.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. So we've got an interesting dynamic here. Sir Gorin, you already referenced how Astral Winds was about as far as you could get, especially from Kingdom Proper and Dragonspine. You're from Kingdom Proper, Sir Sain. Does that mean that they expect different things? Is it easier? Is it more difficult? What are some considerations? And I'll start with you, Sir Gorin, for being an outlier and an outlander, if you will. Easier? More difficult?
for those of you guys that are far away from your kingdom, strap in because it's harder. I've watched across all of our kingdom for 15 years, and as a Crown Knight, I pay very close attention to what other officers do. I use that to help establish precedent, pay attention to trends, things like that. The closer you are to the kingdom, the easier it is to get high-level awards and masterhoods. It's just a simple fact. So, for the people that have a really hard time with that, I just, generally tell them, support your Crown Knights and build your own kingdom. If you want it to be easier, that's generally the best way to do that. Because the other option is to essentially try to advertise yourself, which, trust me, with the Knight Circle doesn't go over as well as you would think. Or to have really strong advocates. And we're in that unique position where we don't have a bunch of knights in Alaska that can pay attention to what you do and point that out to other people in a way that doesn't make it look like you're trying to show off to everybody. So yeah, it's harder.
Oh, I definitely agree. It's harder for you guys it would be harder to run a park up here, or harder to excel or get on the path to knighthood up here. In Las Cruces from the park, I've got, if I have a problem or I want to ask somebody about, something, I've got, a wealth of knowledge and personnel that are like a 15-minute drive from my house. Like Randall's kind of the oracle of Dragonspine. Everybody asks him about everything. He lives 5 minutes. He lives like 8 minutes from my house, and if I want to ask him questions, I drive to his house. And that's not something you guys have access to. And I think the internet makes that kind of stuff a lot easier.
It does.
But it's still, there's still a very noticeable geographic difference. And, when I enter a Crown Quals, people see my, the famous people in Dragonspine see the stuff I entered.
And it's always kingdom level.
Yeah. And when
you do is kingdom level.
When you guys enter stuff up here, it isn't. And it's unfair, but not much I can do about it.
I definitely want to point out one more thing with that is it's not a bad thing. And I want to make that very, very clear. And if you don't ever slip into the mentality that you lament the fact that it's harder. Because when you earn a high-level award here, whether it be a title or a master or something, you have earned it. And you have overcome more than the other people that have had to earn it. And it's take pride in that. I always have. And I've told people that, you don't want it to be easy. You don't want to take the easy path to get something. When you're awarded something for your achievements, you want to be surrounded by people that are screaming, it's about time. Right? Because it makes a huge difference. I've seen lords, barons, counts given to people in a crowd of people that were like, eh. And I've seen those same exact awards given in a crowd of people that are cheering their freaking heads off. And the difference is everything. So take pride in the fact that you have to work a little harder to achieve those things.
So Sir Sain, former monarch of the Kingdom of Dragonspine and a knight. So you've sort of seen both the decision to knight someone or just giving the advice as a circle member. What tips are there for somebody from Alaska to be noticed, and how do they overcome that challenge?
In terms of sword?
Pick one.
Kick ass. Like I was talking to Gorin, I flew in yesterday, picked me up, we started talking about stuff. One of the first things I've asked him was like, all right, who's good? Like, who's a good fighter? And I want, if you want to be that guy, he needs to be the first person you mention, and, if you want to be a sword knight, that's what it takes. I mean, I'll go into a lot of this later, but there's a lot of work that goes into it, but the goal is very simple. Be the best around. With the other, yeah. You can't let anybody ever keep you down. With the other knighthoods, definitely, all of them, the goal is excellence, right? And I'm not trying to, disparage the other knighthoods. I just can only really speak from experience of sword. But the goal is always excellence. And if your goal is to be, the sword knight of Crown Knights, yeah, just be better than everybody else. Be innovative, be adaptive. Think of stuff other people aren't thinking of. Do stuff other people aren't doing. Be willing to do stuff other people aren't willing to do. And that's how you get noticed.
Yeah, I'm gonna throw my squire under the bus here for a minute. But the other day, maybe it's a couple weeks ago actually, I showed something to Lucian that I was working on, and his response was, "Jesus, Gorin, you just wake up every day and think, how can I do Amtgard better?" And I said, "There's your knighthood lesson for today." Really, if whatever you're passionate about every day, how can I do it a little bit better than yesterday? Like he was saying, I want to be better than I was last Saturday. Doesn't matter what you apply that to. It can be fighting, it can be leadership, it can be garbing, anything. Just be better than you were yesterday, constantly. And that's, pretty much describes the path to knighthood.
Okay, so this one's from the internet and our favorite friends on Facebook and Electric Samurai. Again, shaking things up before we start to bring things down to a close here. But so, Sir Sain, should we open Paladin and anti-Paladin to the populace?
Oh, Ben. I don't care. Like, to be honest with you, I don't care. I don't play. I've never played anything but like healer and barbarian ever. So I really don't care.
Sir
Yes,
Gorin?
do it.
I'm telling you right now, this conversation has happened thousands of times in Amtgard. It comes up once a year at least online.
I think it's been 6 months, so it's time
Yeah.
to revisit.
I think we should get rid of Paladin.
I tell you, yeah, right. The only people that care are not knights. In every conversation I've ever had, the knights are not the ones that are like, no, it needs to be knight only. It's the people that aren't yet. And I don't know if they see it because they're like, they want to unlock that achievement one day, or I don't really know what the reasoning is for it. But there is not a knight out there that's like, no, only I get to play Paladin. It's not that big a deal. So yeah, open it up.
Ben is that.
Ben, maybe. Randall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Only I
He's a stickler for tradition.
I love you, Ben.
But yeah, open it up. Whatever. Call it something different if people have problems with the name.
So again, I promised a little bit of lighthearted conversation before we got a little bit more serious. So we talked a little bit before in other panels about what a knight should be or should do. We talked about character. What should a knight not do? Like without getting too outrageous, like obviously we know murder, probably bad. But, in the scale of the questionable gray area, like what are some things like, hey, knight probably shouldn't do that? Is there saying?
Again, like it's I really only have like the sword knight kind of perspective, but my when I go to events and I start fighting people and I really try not to judge people for what they are, but like when I'll definitely see people like there's no way that dude should be a sword knight. And if that's what I think, it's because he's getting beaten by, middle tier fighters. And if you're getting tore up by middle tier fighters, you should not be a sword knight. And if you're doing things worse than like the average Amtgarder, you should definitely not be a knight.
Okay. Sir Gorin?
That's such a huge question. I suppose other than the obvious things like don't break the code of conduct, don't basically intentionally act in bad faith. I think one of the worst things that a knight can do is get to the point where they take more from Amtgard than they give to it. And really, for me, I think really every member should try to follow that path. But there's a lot of people that it takes time before they can give more to Amtgard than they take from it. Which is what makes Amtgard really special for a lot of people who tend to lean on it during some phase of their life. But when you're recognized as a knight, there are so many people that look up to the institution, if not you personally, that you should always make an effort to give more than you take. And so not doing it is bad.
Okay, so last question for both of you before we start wrapping things up. Both of you talked about how knighthood was not a goal. So what is a goal for you right now? Sir Sain?
For me, like super specific.
When I say, hey, do you have any goals?
Yeah. To learn how to block stabs from a shield user with my right hand instead of my left hand.
That was very specific.
Very specific.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Sir Gorin.
I'm going to get a little more general than that. No, we talk about how people who aim specifically for knighthood are often not aiming in the right direction. And one of the things that I like to share with people is it's actually a quote from Vince Lombardi, who said that you should you should aim for perfection. Nobody is perfect, but if you chase perfection, you might just catch excellence. And knighthood is excellence. But everybody who wants to be a knight should honestly be aiming beyond that. Ask yourself, if you really want to be a knight, ask yourself, what would be next? If you got knighted tomorrow, what would you do next? And if you don't have an answer for that, figure it out first. Because that's far more important. I mean, I could throw a white strip of leather at everybody in this room, and it wouldn't change anything. So you have to ask yourself, what's your next step? So for me, some of you were around maybe back in 2008 when I was still up in Astra Winds, and I gave a PowerPoint presentation on the AAEI, which was the Alaskan Amtgard Expansion Initiative. And it showed a map of all the different places that we wanted to try and expand Amtgard to, and the timeline in which we wanted to do it. With the exception of Kenai coming online before the Matsu Valley did, we've stuck to that schedule. And not because I forced it, but because that was just, there was a drive for that. My goal has always been, how can we make the organization one step better? And better in, whether that be in administration or in, collecting finances or in organization in general, or in, membership, whatever. How can we take it to that next level? And that's always my goal on a regular basis. I reanalyze what we're doing and say, what do I want us to do for a next step? And then how can I help with that? How can I encourage other people to want to do more and take it to the next step? So my goal for pretty much everything in Amtgard is, how do I take it one step further?
Okay, thank you. Now, as we come to a close, just real quick, if you would, what's that one thing that if nobody was paying attention to anything else, that you want to foot stomp as we start to close this thing up? So again, any parting remarks and that one foot stomp that comes to mind, or two if you've got them. Sir Sain?
Kind of like the biggest thing that I want to and obviously this panel was before any of the fighting happened this weekend, but to groups of people, and if your goal is to be a better fighter, fighting isn't, just going out and fighting isn't enough. You have to think about fighting. And, one of the questions I always get is how do I be a better fighter? It's well, how often do you think about fighting? On Saturdays. It's just it's just like anything else that you practice. If you're not thinking about it, you're not doing it right. And I think about fighting every day throughout 7 days a week. And it's something that doesn't get said enough when we talk about becoming a better fighter.
Okay. Sir Gorin?
The path to achieving whatever we want to call it, excellence, knighthood, just accomplishment in general, it's really important that people remember that it's a ladder, in the sense that it's incremental. You have to do it poorly before you can do it masterfully. And I would encourage anybody that just wants to succeed to understand that it's okay to not succeed at first. No master painter started out being a master painter. They started out being a horrible crayon scribbler. So when you make your first sword, second sword, 100th sword, whatever, and it's not where you really imagine you want it to be, that's okay. Make another one. And every step of the way you'll learn something more. And then things like awards and masterhoods and knighthood and stuff, that'll all come along with it. But if your goal is to constantly take one more step up the ladder, you're going to get where you want to go. And you'll realize that all those other awards, those are just marks on the ladder. You're going to climb right past them. And doing so is going to get you where you really ultimately want to be.
It's a game of inches, baby.
Right? Every day.
All right. Well, I sure appreciate both your flexibility and your scheduling, and just for spending the last hour with us talking about knighthood, giving us your perspective. I think with each of the Amtgard Leadership University panels, that those watching both online or here in the room really gained a lot from it, and really appreciate you taking the time. So if I could, for the audience, a quick round of applause for our panel members.